It was just another quiet afternoon, until I caught my stepdaughter in the middle of something I never expected. What I decided to do next would change everything, setting off a chain of events that spiraled completely out of control. The afternoon I am talking about happened 3 months ago. The house was unusually still that day. My husband had left early for a weekend business trip, and the absence of his presence made the space feel both calm and unnervingly quiet. I had spent the morning cleaning, folding laundry, and trying to busy myself with little tasks that didn't require much thought. Lily, my 20-year-old stepdaughter, was upstairs in her room. The muffled hum of music filtered faintly through the ceiling, a reminder that I wasn't completely alone. Lily and I had always shared an easy, respectful dynamic. Though she wasn't my daughter by blood, we had developed a bond over the years that felt familial yet distinct. She had her mother's sharp features and quiet intensity, but her own kindness and introspective nature made her stand out. She carried herself like a young woman trying to find her place in the world, and I often found myself wishing I could help her more than I did. As I wiped down the kitchen counter for the 3rd time, I realized how oddly restless I felt. Perhaps it was the stillness of the house, or maybe the way the sunlight poured lazily through the windows, casting long shadows on the wooden floors. Whatever it was, I couldn't ignore the urge to move, to do something, anything, that would fill the empty spaces in my mind. I poured myself a glass of water and stood at the bottom of the staircase. Lily's door was cracked open just enough to let the music seep through. I hesitated, wondering if I should disturb her or leave her be. But my curiosity, coupled with a desire to connect, nudged me forward. "Lily," I called out as I ascended the stairs. "Everything okay up here?" The music didn't stop, but I heard a shuffle from inside her room. The faint sound of movement made me pause halfway up the stairs, uncertain if I should continue. But before I could second-guess myself, I stepped closer to her door, raising my hand to knock. And that's when I saw her. Through the narrow gap in the door, Lily sat on the edge of her bed, her posture slightly slouched, and her hands moving in a way that caught my breath. The realization hit me like a jolt. She wasn't just sitting there casually. She was occupied, her attention entirely absorbed in something deeply personal and private. I froze, my body betraying me as I stood rooted to the spot. My mind raced, telling me to turn around, to leave her to her privacy, to pretend I hadn't seen a thing. But something, maybe shock, maybe a strange sense of vulnerability in the moment, kept me there. Lily's face was turned slightly away, her focus intent on what she was doing. The sunlight streaming through her window painted soft highlights on her profile, her expression relaxed, yet focused. There was something achingly raw about it, a window into a side of her I had never considered or even imagined. I felt my cheeks flush, a heat rising that had nothing to do with the warm afternoon. And then, she looked up. Our eyes met through the sliver of the open door, and the air between us shifted instantly. Her expression morphed from relaxed to startled, her hands stopping mid-motion as her eyes widened in shock. For a split second, we were frozen, caught in a moment that neither of us knew how to navigate. I didn't mean to," I stammered, my voice barely above a whisper as I took an instinctive step back. Lily's face flushed a deep red as she scrambled for a blanket, her movements clumsy in her haste to cover herself. "I thought you were downstairs," she mumbled, her voice thick with embarrassment. "I was," I replied quickly, my own face burning. "I didn't mean to interrupt. It's fine," she cut me off, though her tone wavered. "Just, can you give me a minute?" I nodded, retreating down the hall with my heart pounding against my ribs. My palms were clammy, my breathing uneven as I gripped the banister at the top of the stairs. I told myself it was just an awkward moment, the kind that anyone could stumble into. But the image of Lily, so unguarded and exposed, lingered in my mind, refusing to be pushed aside. After a few minutes, I heard her door creak open behind me. I turned slowly, unsure of what I would say or how I would even meet her eyes. Lily stepped into the hallway, her hair slightly disheveled and her expression a mix of embarrassment and uncertainty. She wore a loose t-shirt and shorts, her attempt at casualness betrayed by the faint redness still coloring her cheeks. "I didn't mean for you to see that," she said, her voice low and hesitant as she leaned against the doorframe. "I shouldn't have barged in," I replied quickly, trying to ease her discomfort. "I wasn't thinking. I'm sorry." She shook her head, a small, self-conscious smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "I guess we're even now," she said, chuckling nervously. "Even?" I asked, tilting my head. "Last summer," she said, her eyes darting up to meet mine briefly before looking away again. "The bathroom? You forgot to lock the door?" The memory flooded back with startling clarity, and my face flushed all over again. I had walked out of the shower, towel barely secured, only to find Lily standing in the doorway, her eyes wide with shock. We had laughed about it later, but the awkwardness had lingered for days. "I completely forgot about that," I admitted with a laugh, the tension in the air lifting slightly. "Well, now we're even," she said, her smile more genuine this time. The ease between us was surprising, even comforting, but beneath the surface I felt the stirrings of something else. An unspoken shift had occurred, subtle but undeniable. And as Lily leaned against the doorframe, her gaze meeting mine more steadily now, I couldn't help but wonder if she felt it too. The days that followed were filled with an unspoken tension, one that neither Lily nor I acknowledged out loud. Yet, we both felt it lingering in the air between us. It wasn't awkwardness, not exactly, but an awareness, an unshakable realization that something had changed. She still moved through the house like she always had, lounging on the couch with her phone in hand, leaving the kitchen a mess after making herself a midnight snack, humming absent-mindedly when she thought no one was listening. But now I found myself hyper-aware of every movement, every glance, every moment we spent alone together. I told myself it was just in my head, that what had happened was nothing more than an unfortunate accident, something to be forgotten with time, and yet I couldn't seem to erase it from my mind. The way she had looked at me that day, the way her eyes had widened in surprise, the way her face had flushed, the way she had hesitated before stepping out into the hallway. It all replayed in my head, over and over, like a song I couldn't turn off. One evening, as I stood at the kitchen counter slicing vegetables for dinner, Lily entered the room, moving past me to grab a glass of water. I felt her presence immediately, the way the air seemed to shift as she stood just a little too close, her arm brushing against mine as she reached for the faucet. "Need help?" she asked casually, taking a sip of water as she leaned against the counter beside me. I hesitated for a split second before nodding. "Sure, you can chop the onions," she groaned, setting her glass down. "You just want me to cry." I chuckled, handing her a knife and a cutting board. "Consider it payback for leaving all your dishes in the sink." She rolled her eyes but took the knife anyway, pulling the onions closer. For a few moments, we worked in silence, the rhythmic sound of chopping filling the kitchen. It should have been a normal moment, an everyday interaction, yet there was an undercurrent of something else beneath it. Lily was the first to break the silence. "So, are we just not going to talk about it?" My hands faltered, the knife pausing mid-slice. I knew exactly what she was referring to, but I wasn't ready to have that conversation. Not yet. "There's nothing to talk about," I said, keeping my voice even as I focused on the carrots in front of me. Lily let out a small laugh, shaking her head. "You're such a liar," I sighed, setting the knife down. "Lily, it was just an accident. It doesn't have to mean anything." She turned to face me fully, her expression unreadable. "Doesn't it?" I met her gaze, my stomach twisting at the way she was looking at me. Curious, hesitant, but also something else. Something I didn't know how to name. "I don't know what you want me to say," I admitted. Lily studied me for a moment before shaking her head, a small smirk tugging at her lips. "Nothing. I just think it's funny." I frowned. "What's funny?" She shrugged, picking up the knife again. "That you think you can pretend like it didn't happen." I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came out. Instead, I turned back to my cutting board, trying to ignore the way my heart was racing. Because deep down, I knew she was right. Dinner that night was quieter than usual. Not uncomfortable, but different. The occasional clatter of silverware against plates filled the silence, along with the distant hum of the television playing in the living room. Lily sat across from me, her eyes focused on her food, but I could tell her mind was elsewhere. So was mine. Every now and then she would glance up at me, something unreadable in her expression, before quickly looking away. I hated how aware I had become of her, how my mind kept drifting back to things I shouldn't have been thinking about. The memory of that afternoon in the hallway still clung to me, lingering in my thoughts no matter how much I tried to push it away. It wasn't just what had happened. It was the way she had looked at me after, the way she had challenged me in the kitchen earlier, as if she knew something I wasn't ready to admit. After we finished eating, Lily stood up, gathering her plate and mine before heading to the sink. I watched as she turned on the faucet, her back to me, the muscles in her shoulders subtly tensing as if she was waiting for me to say something. I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the moment settle between us. "I'll dry," I finally said, standing and grabbing a towel from the drawer. She nodded but didn't say anything as she rinsed the plates, handing them to me one by one. The silence stretched, neither of us addressing the tension hanging in the air, but we both felt it. Halfway through drying a plate, I exhaled slowly, my grip tightening around the ceramic. "Lily, about earlier." She stilled for a fraction of a second before placing another plate into the sink. "I knew you'd bring it up eventually," she said, her tone light but carrying an edge of something deeper. I hesitated, watching her closely. "I just don't want things to be weird between us." Lily finally turned to face me, leaning back against the counter, her arms crossed. "Who says they're weird?" I frowned slightly, setting the plate down. "I can feel it, and I know you can too." She tilted her head, studying me for a moment before speaking. "I think you're the only one making it weird." A rush of frustration, mixed with something I couldn't quite name, tightened in my chest. "Lily, come on, you know what I mean." Her lips curled into a faint smile, though there was something almost knowing behind it. "I do, and I think it bothers you more than it bothers me." I opened my mouth to argue, but the words caught in my throat, because she was right. It did bother me, just not in the way it should have. Instead of embarrassment or discomfort, there was something else entirely, something that made my stomach twist and my pulse race in ways I didn't want to acknowledge. She pushed off the counter, walking past me slowly, deliberately brushing against my arm as she did. "You think too much," she murmured, her voice low, almost teasing, before disappearing down the hallway. I stood there, gripping the dish towel tightly, my entire body on edge. This wasn't just an accident we had moved past. It was something else. Something neither of us had put into words yet. And I wasn't sure if I was ready to. The next few days passed in a blur of normalcy, or at least the illusion of it. Lily and I went about our routines as if nothing had changed. She went to her classes, I handled things around the house, and we shared meals like we always had. But beneath the surface, something was shifting. A slow burning awareness that neither of us spoke about, but both of us felt. I found myself watching her more than I should have. It wasn't intentional at first, just a lingering glance here and there. But I started to notice things I hadn't before. The way she absent-mindedly chewed on her lip when she was thinking. The way she stretched in the mornings, her t-shirt riding up just enough to reveal a sliver of skin. The way her gaze lingered on me a second too long when she thought I wasn't paying attention. One evening, I was in the living room reading when Lily strolled in, flopping onto the couch beside me without hesitation. She pulled her legs up, tucking them beneath her, and rested her chin on her palm as she glanced at my book. "What are you reading?" she asked, her voice casual but her presence distracting. I glanced at the cover before closing it, suddenly unable to focus on the words. "Just something I picked up a while ago. Nothing exciting." Lily smirked, tilting her head slightly. "You always say that when you don't want to talk about something." I exhaled, setting the book aside. "And you always pry when you know you shouldn't." She chuckled, shifting slightly so that she was facing me more fully. "Maybe, but you let me, don't you?" There it was again. That subtle push, the way she seemed to be testing the waters, seeing how far she could go before I pulled away. Except I wasn't pulling away, and we both knew it. I tried to steer the conversation back to safer ground. "How was class today?" She shrugged, her fingers idly tracing patterns on the couch cushion. "Boring. Nothing interesting happens there." Her gaze flickered to mine, a glint of something playful in her expression. "Unlike here." My stomach tightened, but I forced myself to keep my voice even. "Lily." She leaned in slightly, resting her arm against the back of the couch, her face just close enough that I could see the mischief dancing in her eyes. "What?" I knew what she was doing. She was pushing, daring me to acknowledge what was happening between us, but I couldn't. I wouldn't. This was dangerous. A line that shouldn't even be approached, let alone crossed. But I didn't move. For a moment, we just sat there, the space between us shrinking, the tension thick enough to make the air feel heavy. Her fingers moved absent-mindedly, brushing against my arm ever so lightly, sending an involuntary shiver down my spine. I hated how easily my body responded, how something inside me leaned into the moment despite every rational part of me screaming to stop. I finally tore my gaze away, forcing a breath through my lips. "It's late. You should get some sleep." Lily studied me for a second longer, before offering a slow, knowing smile. "Yeah," she murmured, standing up but not before letting her fingers graze my shoulder, a deliberate touch that sent heat through me. "Good night." I didn't answer, just listened to her footsteps as she disappeared down the hall. When I finally looked back at my book, the words blurred together, meaningless compared to the storm raging inside me. This wasn't just in my head. Something was happening. And I didn't know how much longer I could pretend otherwise. The following days were an exercise in restraint, a silent war between logic and something deeper, something neither of us had yet to name. I went about my routine as usual, preparing meals, tidying up, keeping myself occupied with anything that would keep my mind from lingering too long on Lily. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't stop thinking about the way she had looked at me on the couch, the way she had leaned in just enough to make me question where the boundary between us even was anymore. It was as if she knew exactly what she was doing, pushing, testing, waiting for me to break first. Lily, on the other hand, seemed completely at ease with the shift in our dynamic. If she noticed the way I struggled to keep my composure around her, she didn't say anything. Instead, she continued her little games, brushing past me in the kitchen when she didn't need to, sitting just a little too close when we watched TV in the evenings, letting her gaze linger on me with an intensity that made my stomach twist in ways I didn't want to acknowledge. I kept telling myself I was imagining it, that she wasn't doing any of this on purpose, but the way her lips would curve into a small, knowing smile every time she caught me staring told me otherwise. One night, after a long day of trying to pretend everything was normal, I was in my bedroom, folding laundry, when there was a soft knock on the door. I turned, expecting Lily to ask for something simple, a charger, a book, something insignificant. But instead she stood in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice softer than usual. I hesitated for just a moment before nodding, watching as she stepped inside and closed the door behind her. She leaned against it, crossing her arms as if she was trying to decide how to phrase whatever was on her mind. "What's wrong?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral despite the unease curling in my chest. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked over to my bed, sitting down on the edge and running her fingers over the fabric absent-mindedly. "I've been thinking a lot," she murmured. "About us." My breath caught, but I forced myself to stay composed. "Lily, there is no us." The words felt forced, almost unnatural, because even as I said them, we both knew they weren't true. There was something between us, something neither of us had acknowledged outright but had been growing steadily, waiting for one of us to give in. She lifted her gaze to meet mine, something unreadable in her expression. "Then why do you act like there is?" The question hit harder than I expected. I opened my mouth to protest, to tell her she was wrong, that I hadn't done anything, but I knew it would be a lie. The way I hesitated around her, the way I let her get too close, the way I didn't stop her when she tested the limits. I'd been playing into this just as much as she had, and she knew it. "Lily," I started, but she shook her head. "I'm not a kid," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "I know what I feel, and I know you feel it too." My stomach twisted, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure she could hear it. "This isn't right," I said, but the conviction I had meant to put behind the words wasn't there. She stood then, slowly closing the distance between us until she was standing just inches away. I could feel the warmth of her body, the way her breath was slightly uneven, matching my own. "Then tell me to stop," she whispered. And that was the problem. Because I couldn't. The room felt smaller than it had just moments before, the air thick with something unspoken but impossible to ignore. Lily stood so close that I could feel the warmth radiating from her skin, her presence overwhelming in a way that made it impossible to think straight. My mind screamed at me to take a step back, to put distance between us, to remind myself, that this was a line that shouldn't be crossed. But I didn't move. I couldn't. The way she looked at me, eyes searching, waiting, daring me to say something, to stop her, made my resolve weaken with every passing second. I swallowed hard, trying to find my voice, but the words felt stuck in my throat. "Lily, we can't," I finally managed, though my voice lacked the conviction it should have had. She didn't step away. If anything, she moved closer, her fingers brushing lightly against my arm, a barely there touch that sent a shiver through me despite my best efforts to stay unaffected. "Why not?" she asked softly, her tone carrying no accusation, only quiet curiosity. "Because it's wrong?" The question lingered between us, and I wished I could give her the answer she was looking for. She tilted her head slightly, studying me as if trying to read my thoughts. "It doesn't feel wrong," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. And that was the most dangerous part of all. Because deep down, beneath the layers of hesitation, it didn't. It felt inevitable, like something that had been slowly unraveling for weeks, months, maybe even longer, waiting for one of us to acknowledge it. But just because something felt right didn't mean it was. I let out a shaky breath, taking a small step back, not enough to break the tension, but just enough to remind myself that I still had control over this moment. "You don't understand," I said, though I wasn't sure if I was trying to convince her or myself. "This isn't something we can just let happen." Lily's gaze flickered with something unreadable, but she didn't push, didn't argue. Instead, she gave me a small, knowing smile, as if she'd already accepted what I was still struggling to admit. "Okay," she murmured, stepping back at last, giving me space, but not before her fingers ghosted over my wrist one last time, a final, deliberate touch that sent another wave of heat through me. "If that's what you really want." And then just like that, she turned and walked out of my room, leaving me standing there, my breath uneven, my body tense, my thoughts an absolute mess. I should have felt relief that she had dropped it, that she hadn't tried to push me further. But as I stood there in the heavy silence she had left behind, all I felt was the unmistakable sting of something unfinished. That night, sleep felt impossible. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind